Hello, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create a mouse sensitivity option. So when I press the P button, it will open up my mouse sensitivity screen, and I can change the sensitivity of my mouse. Maybe I'll make it 21%, and maybe I'll invert my mouse. So when I remove that screen, my mouse is inverted, and it's a lot more unsensitive. And if I close my project and then I play it again, when I press P, it will keep the settings that I have. So I've inverted my mouse and my mouse sensitivity was set to 21%. If I change this to 67, then I uncheck it again. My settings are changed, and then if I play my project again, I'll start up my game with those settings. I'm going to be doing this tutorial in the third-person template, although you can follow along in the first-person template or whatever template you're using. The principles will be exactly the same. With that said, let's get into the tutorial. Hello, to get started, I'm just going to go over to my third person folder and over to the blueprints folder and open up my third person character. And I just want to go over to the part where it says camera input. Here we're basically going to add some settings which will allow us to adjust our player character's mouse sensitivity. To do that, I'm going to create two new variables. The first one is going to be called mouse sensitivity. And just make this variable a float and go compile. A float variable can hold any number which is a decimal place, and we're also just going to create another variable. Make sure it's a float and just call this invert mouse sensitivity. Just expand this camera input comment and then move this node backwards a bit, and we just want to drag off the action value X and look for multiply. We're going to multiply this by our mouse sensitivity. Just get this and connect this into here, and then connect this into value. So this will basically control our player character's mouse sensitivity when they're moving left and right. We want to do the same thing for up and down, so I'm just going to delete this, drag off here, and look for multiply. And again, I'm just going to multiply this by my mouse sensitivity. I'll get this and connect this into here, and this into here. Now if I compile this, and let's say I change my mouse sensitivity to something like 0.1, when I go compile, if I play my game, my mouse sensitivity is really low. Next, let's go over how we can basically invert the mouse sensitivity. So I'm going to open up my player character again, and I'm just going to move this a bit more back, and I'll move these two nodes backwards a bit, and I just want to drag off here and look for multiply. And I'm going to multiply this by my invert mouse sensitivity. Just get this and connect this into here. Now for this invert mouse sensitivity value, this is either going to be positive one or negative one. If this is a positive one, then nothing will change. It'll just be our normal mouse sensitivity. Although if this is negative one, then I'll basically invert it. So just make sure to connect from here to here. And for the invert mouse sensitivity, just to test it out, make this -1. And we want to do the exact same thing for the up and down. So I'm just going to select these. I'll drag off here and look for multiply. Connect this into here. And then I will drag in my mouse sensitivity and get it and connect this into here. And now if I go compile and I play my game, my mouse sensitivity is inverted. Nice. The next thing I want to do is I want to make it so my player can dynamically choose whether they want their mouse sensitivity to be inverted, and I also want them to be able to customize how sensitive their mouse should be. To do this, we're going to create a widget where our player character can basically control these settings. So to create this widget, I'm just going to go over to my third person folder, right click and create a new folder. I'll just call this widgets. I will head inside here, and then to create a widget, I'm just going to right click and go to my user interface and over to the widget blueprint. Select the user settings, and I'll just call this my mouse options underscore widget blueprint. Open this up, go over to the palette, and just look for an overlay, and drag this overlay into the mouse options widget blueprint. An overlay is basically a widget element which will allow us to stack other elements on top of one another. So right now we have nothing in our overlay, but if say I just go over to my palette and I look for an image, I'll just drag this image and now it's inside my overlay. I want my image to take up as much space as possible. So we just want to go here where it says fill horizontally and fill vertically. and now my image has taken up as much space as possible. I'm just going to rename this to be my background. And I want this to be black, so I'm just going to go to color and opacity. I'll make it black. Then I'm also just going to adjust this A value, so this represents its transparency, and I'll just make it 0.7. Next, I'm going to look for a vertical box and just drag this inside of the overlay. Select the vertical box, and I want it to be in the center, so just like center align horizontally, that will move our vertical box into the center of the overlay. And then I'm just going to have some text. Just drag this text into the vertical box. Select this text, and we just want to go to text. And here I can customize what I want this to say. So I'll just make this say mouse settings. Now, this is at the very top. I want there to be a bit of space, so I'm just going to select my vertical box. And if I go to padding, and if I go to top, I can say add a padding of 15 in the top, and then there'll be a bit of a gap. Okay, next I'm going to look for a horizontal box, and just drag this inside of the vertical box. And if you select the horizontal box, press Ctrl D to duplicate it. We want 2 horizontal boxes. Then look for some text, and drag a text into the first horizontal box, and drag a text into the second horizontal box. Then look for a slider, and drag this inside of the first horizontal box, and then look for a checkbox, and drag this into the second horizontal box. Then finally, look for a spacer. Right now you can see my box is really small, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the spacer, as it will allow me to basically expand the size of my vertical box. So if I just drag in my spacer, drag it inside of the vertical box, and just select it, and if I give it a size, I can control size in the X and the Y, but we just want to expand it in the X. And as you can see, it's making my vertical box longer. This is exactly what I want. Let's make it 750. Now I want my mouse settings to be in the center, so I'm just going to select here, center align horizontally. And then I want there to be a bit of gap between horizontal boxes, so I'm going to go to padding and add some padding in the bottom of 50. I'll also select this horizontal box and add some padding of, let's say, 20. That way there's a bit of a gap. Next, just select the text, make it fill. This will make the text take up as much space as possible. Do the same for the slider, change this to fill, and I'll do the same for this text and for this checkbox. Select this first text, and we just want to call this mouse sensitivity. We'll use this slider to basically customize how sensitive our mouse should be. I also want the player to basically know what number their mouse sensitivity is at. So if we just look for some more text and drag this into the horizontal box. Now I want this text to take up 50% of the space in the horizontal box. So to do that, we set it to fill, and right now you can see this number is set to 1. We did the same for this slider. I'm just going to change this to fill, and then I'm just going to change this to be 0.5. That'll basically mean this text will take up 50% of this whole box. Next, let's just select the slider and change it to 0.25. That'll mean it'll take up 25% of this whole box. And then I'm just going to select this final text, and I'll make this 0.25. And this will take up 25% of this box. That way it looks all nice and organized. Next, let's just select this text, and we just want to call this invert mouse. Okay, next go to our graph. Here we can basically code the logic for how we want this widget to behave. And event construct, when we open this widget, I basically want to, an event construct, that'll basically fire as soon as our widget's on the screen. And when our widget appears on the screen, I want my player character to be able to see their mouse cursor. So to do that, we can just right click and look for get player controller. Then we can just drag up here and look for set show mouse cursor, and just make sure it's checked. And then that will basically make sure our player can see their mouse cursor. We also just want to drag up here and look for set input game and UI only. This will basically make it so our player character can interact with this UI element. Connect from here to here. Then for the in widget to focus on, this will basically ask us to specify which widget we want to focus on. We just want to drag up here and look for self. That way we focus on this particular widget. Let's compile this and save it. The next thing I want to do is I want to make it so when my player presses, let's say, the P button, will make the mouse options appear on the screen. So to do that, let's head over to the input folder. We want to go to actions, Here we can basically customize all of the different actions we want to have in our game. To create a new action, I'm just going to right click and go to input and select input action. I'll call this input action underscore settings. Then I want to go over to my input mapping context. This basically has all of the different controls in my game. If I open this up, I'm just going to go add a new action mapping. And then I want to select my input action settings. I just want to expand this. Then if I select here and I press the P button, when I basically press the P button, it's going to perform my input action underscore settings. So here we can configure what buttons we want to press in order to perform certain actions. So when I press P, it's going to perform the input action underscore setting. Let's go back to our third person character. These nodes here have basically added the input mapping context to my player character. So basically add all of the different controls to my character here. So we don't need to set that up. So I can just right click and look for input action underscore settings. And then if I just expand it, when I press the P button, the started node is going to fire. And when that happens, I just want to drag off here and look for create widget. And I want to create my settings widget. And I want to create my mouse options widget. We just want to right click on this return value and promote it to a variable. And we're going to just call this our mouse options menu. And then we just want to drag off here and add this to our viewport. This will make it so we can see our mouse options. So now if I compile this and I play my game, if I press P, I can see my mouse settings, I can see my slider, and I can see this invert mouse checkbox. Although we also want the player character to be able to remove the mouse settings menu, so let's cover that quickly. If I just go back to my third person character, when we create our mouse options, we basically store it as this variable. So if my player character presses the P button, we're going to check to see if we already have a mouse options menu on our screen. To do that, we can drag in the mouse options, get it, right click here, and then just look for convert to validated get. Connect from started into here. If this is not valid, then we're going to create our mouse options widget, and then we're going to set it. This will make this element valid. So then if I press P again, and this is valid, what I want to do is I just want to drag in my mouse options, get it, then just drag off here, and then just drag off here and look for remove from parent. This will remove the widget from our screen, and then we just want to drag in the mouse options menu and set it, and this will make it no longer valid. So now I can go compile, close this, and if I go play, if I press P, I can see my mouse settings. Then if I press P again, it disappears. Although when I play my game, I can't really move the camera like how I used to, and that's because in our mouse options, when we create the widget and it appears on the screen, we set our input mode to game and UI only, and we tell the game to show our mouse cursor. So when we remove the widget, we just want to undo this. So I'm just going to copy these nodes, and then I'm going to paste them here, connect from here to here, although we want to not show the mouse cursor, and we can just delete this. Instead, we just want to drag off get player controller and look for set input game only. Then connect from here to here and go compile. Now if I go play, if I press P, and then I press P again, I get my normal controls back. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to make it so when we actually update our mouse settings, it will update the mouse settings for our third person character. To do this, we're going to have to create a save system so that we can actually save the values that our player character sets their mouse sensitivity to be, and whether or not they've chosen to invert their mouse sensitivity. So I'm going to go over to my blueprints folder, right click, go to blueprint class. I'm going to go over to all classes and look for a save game. Select this, and we can just call this our mouse save. Open this up, and we just want to create two new variables. For the first variable, just call this mouse inverted question mark, and make sure it's a boolean. For the second variable, just call this mouse sensitivity, and for the variable type, change this to be a float. Then compile both of these. Next, we want to go over to our third person character. Then we basically want to reference all of the information in our mouse save, and we'll use it to basically set our mouse sensitivity value and whether the invert mouse sensitivity should be -1 or +1. So to do that, I'm going to find some free space in my event graph, right click and look for event begin play, and event begin play we just want to drag off here and look for does save game exist. We're going to check to see if we have a save game under a specific slot name. For the slot name, let's just call it mouse. So we're going to check to see if we have a save game called mouse. For the slot name, I'm just going to right click on this and promote it to a variable. We can just call this slot name and make sure it has a value of mouse. Drag off the return value and look for a branch. If we do not have a save game called mouse, then we're going to create one. So off of false, drag off here and look for create save game object. For the save game object class, we want to select our mouse save, and then we just want to right click on this return value and promote it to a variable. And we can just call this our mouse save reference. And then just go back to your mouse save reference and choose the starting values that you want your player to have for their mouse. So for the mouse sensitivity, we need to actually make sure that the mouse sensitivity can never be 0, otherwise the player won't be able to move the mouse. So at the very least, you need to make sure that this value is 0.1 if you wanted it to be something low. But I'm just going to make mine 1. And then for the mouse inverted, I'm just going to leave this unchecked. Compile this, then go back to your third person character. Then we just want to drag off the mouse save reference and get the mouse. And then we want to get the mouse sensitivity and then drag in our mouse sensitivity and set it. And we'll set it so it's that value. And then we want to get the invert mouse sensitivity, set it, and then just get the mouse inverted. And this is a boolean. If this is true, then we're going to make this value -1. And if this is false, then we're just going to make this value 1. To do that, we can just right click and look for the select. And we want this one with the 3 arrows. Connect from return value into here and from mouse inverted into index. So if this is true, we want this to be -1. And if this is false, we want this to be 1. Then, because we actually don't have a save game called mouse, we need to create one. So to do this, we can just drag up here and look for save game to slot. The save game is going to be our mouse save reference, get it. And then the slot name is going to be what we called it. So we just called it mouse, get it, and connect this into here. So if we don't have a save game, then we're going to create one and set our starting mouse sensitivity values and our invert mouse sensitivity values. If we do have a save game, then we're just going to drag off true and look for load game from slot. The slot name, if we just hold control when we drag in this variable, that will automatically get it for us. Connect this into slot name. And then if we do have a slot name with mouse, we can then just drag off this return value and look for cast to mouse save. We then want to store this, so we drag in our mouse save reference, look for set, and connect this into here and this into here. And then we can just copy all of these nodes, go Control C and Control V, connect this into here and this into here, and from this here into here. And this will basically load all of the settings that we have in our mouse save onto our player. Nice. The next thing we need to do is we need to make it so when we change the settings in our mouse options, it will change in our player character and it will also update the save. So now if I just compile this, and I'm going to go back to my mouse options, and what we want to do here is we want to make our mouse options have a way to reference our player character save. Now there are many different ways we could do this, although I'm just going to show you one way. So I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call this mouse save reference. And for the variable type, and look for the mouse save, and we're going to select object reference. We're going to make this instance editable and expose on spawn. Just compile this. Now if I go back to my third person character, when I create the mouse option widget blueprint, if I just right click on this and I go refresh nodes, here I can basically give this widget the reference to my mouse save reference. So I'm just going to get it and connect this into here, compile this, and now my mouse options will have a reference to my player's save. And we're going to use the information in here to basically set where this slider should be and what the value of this should be, and whether this should be checked or not. So I'm just going to select this text and just call this the mouse sensitivity text. Make sure it is a variable, and we can just call this the mouse slider. And I'm going to select this, and we can just call this invert mouse checkbox. Let's go over to our graph and event construct. Let's drag in our mouse slider, drag off here and we'll set value, connect this into here, and for the value we can drag in our mouse save reference, get it, and get the mouse sensitivity and connect this into here. Then we can just drag in our mouse sensitivity text, get it, drag off here and for set text, and we want this one set text, connect this into here, and just drag off the mouse sensitivity and look for %. And this will basically convert this into a percentage. Just expand this. By default, it will display this as a percentage to 3 decimal places. So we don't want that. So here under maximum fractional digits, change it to be 0. That way it doesn't do that. Then connect this into the return value. Then just drag in the invert mouse checkbox, get it, drag off here, and look for set is checked. Connect from here to here, and then we can just drag off our mouse save reference and get the mouse inverted and connect this into here. Then we just want to go back to our designer, select our mouse slider, scroll down and go on value changed. When we update the slider, we want to update our player's mouse sensitivity. So to do that, we can drag in the mouse save reference, get it, drag off here and look for set, and we want this one, set mouse sensitivity, and connect this into here and here. When we do this, we also want to set our player character's mouse sensitivity here. So inside my mouse options, I'm going to create another variable and call this player reference. Again, there are many different ways we can do this, but I'm just going to go with my variable type, third person character, and I want an object reference. Make this instance editable and expose and swarm, go compile. Then if I go back to my third person character, I can right click here and go refresh nodes. I'll drag off here and look for get reference to self, and I'll compile this. Now my widget will have a reference to my player character. So I can then drag this in, get it, drag off here, and look for set mouse sensitivity, and I'll set it to be whatever this is. And then I want to just drag in my mouse sensitivity text, get it, drag off here and look for set text, connect from here to here, and then I want to just drag off here and look for as %, expand this and change the maximum fractional digits to be 0, connect this into the return value, and then finally we just want to drag in our mouse save reference, get it, drag off here and look for save game to slot, connect this into here, and for the slot name, get what you called it, so I called my mouse, and then connect this into here. Now this should save and update our player character's mouse sensitivity. We want to do a similar thing for our checkbox. So on check state checked, when I click on this, I will drag in my invert mouse checkbox, get it. I want to get and see whether it's checked. So I'll look for this one, is checked. If it is checked, then I want to get my mouse save reference. Then I just want to drag off here and look for set mouse inverted, connect this into here and this in here. So if it's checked, then this will be true. If it's not checked, then this will not be true. And then I also want to update this in my player. So I'll drag my player reference, get it, drag off here and look for set. This one, set inverse mouse sensitivity, connect from here to here. And then we want to right click and look for the select, connect this into the return value, this into here. If it's true, we want this to be -1. If it's false, we want this to be 1. And then we want to save this. So I'll just copy these two nodes, Control C, Control V, and connect this into here and go compile. Now this should all work. Let's just test it out. So I go play. If I press P, right now we can see my mouse sensitivity is 100 and my invert mouse is unchecked. If I check my invert mouse, then I press P, your sensitivity, it should be inverted. And if I press P again, let me decrease my mouse sensitivity to 32%. And it's a bit slow to move my mouse. Although, if I change my mouse sensitivity to 0, I can't move my mouse at all. So let's prevent our player from being able to do that. I'm gonna just go over to my widgets and over to my mouse options. And here on the mouse slider, let's just drag off this value and look for clamp. And we want this one, clamp float, connect from here to here. And then this will make it so this can only have a minimum value of whatever we put here and a max value of whatever we put here. Sliders normally go from a value of 0 to 1, so we can leave the max at 1, although for the minimum, make this 0.1, then go compile. And if I close this and I go play, if I press P, if I now try and drag this all the way to 0, we can see the minimum value is 10 because we made it 0.1. Okay, and just like that, we have made a nice mouse settings. And there's one more thing I want to show you. In case you ever want to delete the save game file inside of your project, just right click on it, then go show in Explorer. And if you just go to your project, so my project's called mouse, go over to the save folder, then go to save games, and you can see the mouse save. And if I delete this, when I play my game again, I've deleted my save, so when I press P, I'll start with the default values that I had in my save game. So with that, you've now learned how to make it so we can change the mouse sensitivity and whether or not our mouse should be inverted. And you've also learned a bit about how to create save games and load games. That's all for this video. If you'd like to learn even more about how to create widgets inside of Unreal Engine and how to make a professional main menu, as every game will need a professional main menu with good settings, splash screens, etc. I have recently made a new course where I cover all of that. You can find a link to it in the description of this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!